What's up, guys? It is the Nick Beasley Show. The football season starts off this weekend with a big time game, Florida State, Georgia Tech, live from Ireland. I will be watching. It'll be a great game, I'm sure. Can't wait to see what Florida State does this year. I've got with me from FCS Football Central, the owner, the operator of all things FCS, Zach Mckinnell.
How you doing, man? I appreciate you having me on the show.
Absolutely, man. Hey, I appreciate you being on here, last minute, but we made it work. Always got to make it fit.
Always, man. Hey,
Now,
you know how it is.
yes, sir. Now, when we were in Mobile for the Senior Bowl, because that's where we met, you were telling me some more about some of the FCS guys that were there that ended up going pro or figuring something out. Is there anybody right now that before the season starts, do you look at from maybe last year that's coming that came back that could exceed expectations and end up being a draft pick in the in April?
I mean, I think there's a few guys this year that potentially could play their way into that projection. I think, quarterback's always the position everyone wants to look towards. You got Mark Gronowski at South Dakota State. I mean, the dude had if they do what they're supposed to do, he can end his career as the winningest quarterback in college football history. Nick, I mean, he's undefeated as a starter at the FCS level because the one game that he supposedly lost at the FCS level, he got hurt in the second quarter and they lost the national championship because he got hurt in the COVID year. So he's won almost every game, and his one actual loss as a starter, Nick, was to Iowa. It was a 1 point loss in 2022. That team's won almost 30 consecutive games, back to back national champions. He was the Walter Payton Award winner. The one criticism I've heard from scouts on Mark, though, is because South Dakota State is so good, he only has film as a redshirt freshman against Iowa, which was not his best game. So I think that week one game against Oklahoma State this year, when South Dakota State goes down to Oklahoma State and Stillwater. I think that's going to be a massive game. There's a defensive end I really, really like in David Walker from Central Arkansas. He actually started his career at the Division II level, transferred up to Central Arkansas, has had back-to-back seasons where he's a Buck Buchanan Award finalist. I mean, I think he's 40 tackles for loss, almost 20 sacks in just 2 seasons for the Bears over there. And then there's a athletic freak, man. I don't know if he's getting talked about enough. His name is his there's two guys on this team actually. Eric Hunter and Elijah Williams from Morgan State. Now, Morgan State is a team that hasn't got a lot of talk just because they haven't been good. They haven't had a winning season since I think 2014. But Nick, Eric Hunter is 6'4", 230 pounds, and is fast enough to play safety.
And
So
he's up
when you
to
got
FCS level.
Yeah, at the FCS level, is a
Wow.
two-time FCS All-American now. So I think Eric Hunter is going to be one of those guys where you see kind of like this guy was an offensive player, but you remember how Dylan Lobby burst onto the scene due to his athleticism and his performance and just kind of being that freak athlete. That's kind of the Eric Hunter for the defensive side of the ball this year. And then Elijah Williams is just a monster off the edge, man. Just been dominant, can completely take over a game for that Morgan State defense. And then there's also a guy, just honorable mention, Ice Waxter, or from Villanova at corner, like a 6'2" corner, long, rangy, and also too did not allow a touchdown last year. It was the highest graded FCS defensive back in the country last year, and would have ranked, I think, fourth or fifth across the entire nation last year.
Wow. And again, that's kind of why I wanted to have you on because, like, the bigger schools like the Oklahoma States, the Alabamas, we know all the players, we know what they do. These smaller schools, these FCS schools, they don't get a lot of looks. I'm sure you covered Stanford University, FCS school
Yep.
in Birmingham. One of their players, Cortland Marsh, transferred to Memphis. I don't know if he transfers to Memphis if Stanford gets more respect. But it does seem like, in the grand scheme of the media, the FCS level doesn't get the respect that they deserve. Because, like you said, there's guys down there that could probably go play Division I, could probably go start at an Alabama or bigger school like that. But they chose the FCS level because they they wanted to get looks on the FCS, eyes on the FCS level. And that's really admirable that guys that are really good that could play at these bigger schools, they choose to go to a smaller school. Like Shador Sanders, he played at Jackson State. Obviously, he ended up going to Colorado with his dad. I think if Dion had went to Colorado, I think Shador would have stayed at Jackson State. I don't think that he would have moved up, not because he's not good enough, but because he was so good, it put Jackson State on the map for a lot of people.
Yeah, I I know there's so many different ways to talk about this topic, and it's a little bit, sensitive for some FCS fans to talk about. The age of the transfer portal has made it so hard to retain talent, especially this age of NIL too, that I know players who, we talk about tampering. Tampering is a real thing at this level. And I mean, I know a handful of players that had six-figure offers to transfer up before we got to week 7 or 8 last year. And there's some guys who are now playing at the Power Five level who just got bags tossed at them because they were playing so well. And you look at some of the success stories. You look at like a Jared Verse was over at UAlbany, went to Florida State, became an All American, was a first round pick this year. You look
Right,
at Dalton Kincaid, who's now with the Bills, transferred up. He was at a non-scholarship school at the FCS level, transferred up to Utah, and now he's a starting tight end at the for the Buffalo Bills at the NFL level. Then I mean, you look at some other ones. I mean, you look at the Heisman Trophy favorites right now. Shador started his career at Jackson State. Well, he won the Jerry Rice Award for the Freshman of the Year. Well, the guy who won it the year before was Cam Ward, who's now at Miami and potentially one of the best quarterbacks in college football. He started his career in Incarnate Word. So
right,
you see a lot of these success stories. Now, there's some that jump up and aren't able to contribute, but I still strongly believe if you're a superstar and you can play at that level, the scouts are going to find you.
right. And I mean, like when you talk about like Shador and Cam Ward, and you mentioned Dalton Kincaid, who is one of my favorite tight ends in the NFL, and he's probably going to end up being the best friend for Josh Allen this year because there is no Stephon Diggs, there is no Gabe Davis. It's him, and then like Keon Coleman, but rookie guys, young guys. So he's probably going to end up being the leading receiver for the Bills. And you talk about him, he kind of went into Bills camp last year. Many people thought, okay, he'll probably be like a blocking tight end, and he ends up taking the job from Dawson Knox like pretty quickly. Early on in the season, it was clear which one was better. And something I love is Travis Kelsey and George Kittle. Those guys get college tight ends, professional tight ends down in Nashville. They do a tight end U there. They don't care. You can be the FBS level, you can be Power Five, you can be FCS. If you're a good tight end, they want to coach you up so you can get better. So that's going to help football as a whole. Having these Hall of Fame type tight ends coaching these young guys that maybe are at the FCS level that don't know how to elevate to the big level, and then they get with those guys and they learn what they do, and it incorporates into their game, and it makes them that much better. So, like you mentioned him, you mentioned Jared Verse, who's going to essentially have to replace a Hall of Fame defensive tackle in Aaron Donald, but he's not doing it alone. He's got one of his best friends from college with him, but I think he's probably one of the best pass rushers. I would have put him over Leatu Latu this year as far as best pass rusher in the draft. And that's just going based off of what I've seen out of both of them. Um,
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, Albany has such a loaded defensive line. I mean, you had Verse who ended up transferring out to Florida State. Well, the guy who took his place, Anton, was an FCS All American last year, just transferred to Arkansas. It's probably going to be their best defensive end. And then the other guy on the other side was AJ Simon, who tragically passed away this all season, but was probably going to be drafted or even a UDFA. So they had 3 NFL caliber defensive linemen at Albany that all made significant impacts.
right. You mentioned the player that passed away. I heard about that. Prayers go out to his family and friends, and all the people affected by that. And he was good. He was really good last year, and he probably would have been like a great. He would have been a great player in the pros, I'm sure. Probably would have been undrafted free agent only because the FCS level thing, which I think at this point in the draft process is kind of ridiculous to say, well, a guy played at FCS, So that means he's not going to be a draft pick, or he'll be a low draft pick. You never know. There could be a guy this year, one of the guys you mentioned, could elevate and become the best, one of the best players at their position in the country, go down to the Senior Bowl and make a huge name for themselves, and then boom, we're talking third, fourth round, and they're getting paid, and then their family lives change forever when they get paid like that. So I don't like the like how scouts kind of view FCS players. And I get it. You look at Jalen Milroe, you look at Bo Nix, guys that went to big colleges. They're going to get looks at more because they're on national TV more. But the FCS level, you can find them on the ESPN app on ESPN Plus and watch all their games, and that's how I keep up with a lot of the FCS guys. Is just going through like the schedule and like Stanford. I watch all of Stanford's stuff because it's right there on the ESPN app. All I have to do is have an ESPN Plus subscription, and I can just watch their games. And to me, sometimes the FCS games are way better than any of the Power Five games because Power Fives are playing smaller schools early on, and the FCS guys they're playing talent that are might be better than them in the media's eyes, but they're out there playing for jobs. They're out there trying to prove to scouts, trying to prove to you know analysts that hey, we deserve to be in this conversation. We deserve to be part of the conversation of the whole of college football. And you mentioned the transfer portal. I don't know how you feel about it. I think it's the dumbest thing that they could have ever done, opening it up to where every year you could transfer 2 to 3 times a career in college. I think if you've committed to a school, now if you're at an FCS school and you want to transfer to a big school for your senior year, like Jared Verse did, like Kincaid, do it. But if you're at a big school, you shouldn't be allowed to move different schools if you've committed to being at like Alabama or like Texas or you know what I mean? Like it's okay to transfer for like 1 year, but some of these guys transfer every single year. And then that puts FCS guys and high school guys on the back burner. If you can get like a superstar from Alabama to come to your school, you're not going to look at that FCS guy that might have led, you know, the FCS level in tackles to come to your school because you can get Caleb Downs from Alabama, who you've seen more tape on because there's more game film.
Um, I mean, again, there's so many levels to this conversation. I mean, I don't think it's a bad thing. Um, I think the one free transfer rule was kind of the sweet spot, but the unlimited transfer rule, it almost took it like a step too far, opening the floodgates. Just because, I mean, you're gonna have kids who are playing like 3, 4, 5 schools. I mean, what was it? Was it JT Daniels played like 6 schools? Yeah, I still think he might be in college at this point. Um,
No, he medically had to retire from just concussions and stuff. But
I mean,
yeah,
because I mean, yeah, he played
he
for Georgia, USC, Rice, West Virginia. I mean, he went
yeah,
all over the map. But I think the transfer portal is good to a point, though, because it does give players some sort of freedom, especially because there's a thing where coaches will lie in recruitments, and like if you don't get the role that you were promised, if a coaching change happens, if academically it's not working for you, or even there's family issues outside of that where you might need to change locations or any just personal issue. I think one is fine. I think one free and then one if you're another free if you're a graduate transfer is fine. If you graduate, you should be able to do whatever you want at that point because
right, right.
you're there to ball out. But I do think unlimited transfers where you see guys who, I mean, they have even had to come up with a new term like short term signee, where the guys will get to campus in December and transfer back out in January. And, they like the quarterback, the 5-star quarterback who was at Bama, Nick Saban retires. He gets back in the portal, transfers to Notre Dame. Julian Sand, he was at Bama for 2 months before he was in the portal again. So like stuff like
Right.
that might get tricky, but I do think overall the transfer portal's fine. They just have to find a way to refine it. I think NIL is a much bigger issue that they need to put some tweaks to and kind of try to put some guardrails on that before it gets completely out of hand, which it might already be there.
Well, you mentioned the NIL, and I was going to ask you this because the NFL, as we know, is a salary cap driven league, and obviously you can, teams can manipulate the salary cap. I mean, these are billionaire owners. They can find a way to manipulate it, but there is a cap to like the market is the market. Do you think in college football a salary cap is needed for some of these NIL deals? Because like from the school, maybe not from like if Nike wants to endorse a player or Under Armour, that's one thing. But the school to pay you, I think there does need to be like a cap of like you can't make more than this if you come to this school.
Mm, I don't know about that, just because it's hard to put a salary cap in place in a capitalistic kind of model that they've already created. So I think that'd be tough. Um, I would say that I do think there needs to be guardrails in terms of here's where the thing is. I want to get back to this is the rev share that's supposedly coming down the pipeline. I think that's going to
Right.
change how schools approach NIL because if you're already getting paid through the rev share, then maybe that we'll see the NIL evaluations kind of return back to what we were expecting. But also, too, here's the other thing is until every single NIL deal is publicly reported and you can trust the reporting, we really don't know what a lot of these players are actually making. A lot of it's speculation, a lot of it's reporting, and in this age of social media, one rumor can go insane. And even when it's proven false, Nick, I mean, you still see some rumors get used as examples by high level media just because that's just kind of the accepted practice. So I think we have to be real careful. But until NIL deals become like NFL contracts where they're publicly reported, we know exactly how many years, the amount, the stipulations, and right now it's supposedly not able to be performance based. But Nick, we all know that there's performance incentives attached to these NIL deals sometimes, even though they're not supposed to be. Until all that's reported up front, I just don't see the NCAA instituting a salary cap.
Right. And you mentioned the performance incentives. I mean, that's what the NFL does to kind of, deal with the salary cap. Like Bill Belichick was on Pat McAfee show earlier, and he straight up said, yeah, there's some guys that we want to re-sign that maybe they think their number is at 20 million and we can only afford 10 million. So we'll put 6 million into a incentive deal. If you get this many tackles, if you have this many touchdowns, then you get this number. The college is doing the same thing. I think colleges, especially the bigger schools, they're following the NFL's idea of paying players, which I want to just preface this. I am not against paying players. They're putting their bodies on the line each and every weekend for our entertainment. They deserve to get paid. I'm just saying at some point, and like you said, there needs to be guardrails attached. And really, the NCAA messed up when they came up with this because they should have, when they came up with it, had a plan set, and they don't have that. And so now it's just a free for all of, like you mentioned, we don't know how much these guys are making. Nobody knows how much Texas paid Arch Manning to come to Texas. We know that what his family said is that they love Sarkeesian. They wanted him to be in the SEC. Texas is in the SEC now, and he fits Sark's offense. Great. We're not stupid. It's the Manning family. We know there's money attached to that name, and you can't tell me that he's not getting a bunch of probably more than what's ever been said about it to be at Texas instead of at like LSU or Bama or somewhere like that. And again, Texas, and this will come into recruiting in the SEC, bigger state, they can offer more money, and their boosters are willing to pay whatever to get guys to come to their school. At Alabama, it's kind of the same thing. Nick Saban was there, and I'm not going to say Saban was paying players before, but I'm not going to say he wasn't. But now it's DeBoer where you've lost the Saban effect, but he can still throw a bag at you because the boosters want the program to do well. So DeBoer can still just pay guys whatever they want. Um, I, I'm kind of with you, and you've kind of changed my mind on the salary cap thing. Maybe there doesn't need to be a cap, but like just some limitations to what is allowed to happen.
Yeah, I mean, I think the salary cap will kind of like, I don't think there should be one because obviously there's going to be a limit on what the schools can offer, especially when you get into like Title IX ramifications and stuff like that. Where, I mean, you see lawsuits already where women's sports are suing that they're not getting equal representation in NIL opportunities. Um, so there's just so many political and legal factors that I think are coming down the pipeline that you won't see a massive shift in approach until all these lawsuits start settling out with like the House case and all these things that we're seeing go through the court system now. Until all that plays out, I just don't expect the NCAA to institute any massive change to what's already going on.
right? Until they actually have to do it, they probably won't, unfortunately. Which kind of, like I said, like when they came up with this, they should have had a plan, and they didn't. And that's kind of why we're in the situation we're in now, where guys are transferring, they're getting money, which is great, but it's kind of become like every offseason, it's like, where is this guy going? Hey, you mentioned Julian Sayed. I'm going to mention somebody else, Caden Proctor. As soon as Saban retired, he went to Iowa, and like a week later, is back at Bama. Like, I don't think that's fair that because you're costing a roster spot to somebody, maybe from the FCS level, maybe from the high school level, or maybe another transfer that they had planned to come in. Well, now that guy can't come to Bama because Proctor's back. And this guy can't go to Iowa because Proctor went there, so he went somewhere else. So schools are losing out on talent by being a free for all.
Yeah, I just don't know if there's a way to fix that, to be honest with you. And I mean, to be fair, that's always been the case, in my opinion. I think, even when there's always going to be the story of, oh, we missed on this guy because we gave the roster spot to the wrong guy, or this guy didn't live up to his commitment. And then there's the same vice versa where the school doesn't live up to the commitment to the player. So I just think that's the nature of the business now, man. And you see it even at the NFL level.
Right. I mean, you had who was it? Uh the Falcons got in trouble for tampering with Kirk Cousins.
The Dolphins supposedly got
Yeah.
in trouble with tampering recently.
Yeah, the Dolphins got in trouble. They lost draft picks. And like I don't know if you saw it, but Tua Tagovailoa came out and did an interview on the Dan Lebitard show, and he frankly, I mean, he literally said Brian Flores basically talked down to him, told him, "You're not good enough. You're not supposed to be in this position." And then he gets an offensive minded head coach that believes in him, and we see the product on the field happening. He gets him Tyreek Hill, he gets him Jalen Waddle, and now the Dolphins are every year now in the conversation. Can they be, will they be a playoff team? Can they get to the divisional round? And I'm a Dolphins fan. I desperately want us to get to the divisional round, dude. I was so mad when we lost to the Bills last year because I'm like, great, we got to go play Kansas City in the cold. That's Kansas City already is going to be impossible to beat because they have a great quarterback. Now you add in the fact that we don't know how to play in the cold, and you've got guys out there without sleeves, freezing and getting killed, and I'm just supposed to sit there and just watch the game. And like that's what I did. I watched the game, and the whole time I'm thinking, and I don't ever want this to happen, but I'm thinking, can Patrick go down? Can he have a break? Can we maybe he needs to warm up? Like just something to give us some reprieve because Kansas City played great in that game, and it worries me even more now. They got better on offense. Their entire offense is now faster than last year's. They've got receivers that can catch. Their defense, yeah, they lost Snead, but they got better as a whole. But like back to the college stuff, at the FCS level, are there any schools that are kind of flying under the radar right now that could end up making a playoff push at the end of the year?
I mean, I think there's always a few. I look at Western Carolina as a team that could make a push. I don't think they haven't made the playoffs since I think 1983 or something
Wow.
like that. So it'd be history for them. Never won a conference title at this level. So if they were able to get a conference title, get an auto bid, that'd be massive for them. Probably got I think the best overall quarterback in the subdivision, in Cole Gonzalez, who is the son of Billy Gonzalez over at Florida. Man, he can spin it. Kerwin Bell has done an amazing job at building that program. They got athletes everywhere. I think the defense is really going to take a step forward for them. I think an interesting program to watch is Charlton State. This is the first year that they've been eligible for the postseason since their transition from Division Two. They've been putting a lot of money in that program. They won 8 games last year. Defensively, they're going to have to improve, but they return, I think, 9 or 10 offensive starters this upcoming year. So I think Charleston State has a really, really good shot to make that first ever postseason run at the FCS level. And they open up the season week 0, man. So they'll be playing this upcoming weekend in a huge matchup against McNeese, which is an interesting team to look at this year. But Elon is another sleeper team. I think Elon's going to find a way to get back into the playoffs. They missed it last year due to some poor out of conference play. But when I look at that team, returning quarterback, returning wide receivers, offensive line is going to be experienced, and then they probably got the best safety duo in the country with Khalil Baker and Caleb Curtin, and they got 2 freshman All-American linebackers coming back to anchor the middle of that defense. So I think Elon is another team you could see emerge, and then finally Illinois State, who last year won 6 games, but I think 4 of their 5 losses were by like 4 or 5 points or less. They were like on the cusp of being really special last year. Now, quarterback's a question mark for them. Mason King comes back at running back. They probably got one of the top 2 or 3 wide receivers in that division or in that conference in the Missouri Valley. And then defensively, man, Amir Abdullah, another guy who could be on NFL radars at edge rusher, is just a freak and can cause havoc. And then the secondary, they really reloaded through the portal, brought back some good guys. And then I think at linebacker, another freshman All-American returns for them. So I think Illinois State's a team that could be due for a breakout season. I think they were a preseason top 15 team just based off the hype that they had last year.
Well, you mentioned that one of the teams is playing this weekend, or two of the teams, McNeese and then Charleston. You said,
Tarleton, yeah.
yeah. Well, I'll definitely be watching. And I'll be watching all of college football because, dude, I cannot tell you how freaking excited I am that we actually like. I've been trying to think like going into the football season, I'm going to be streaming NFL games, but dude, I love watching Saturday Night Football, and I'm excited to have it back. And that's why I wanted to have you on because I knew there's going to be a lot of FCS games that maybe I haven't looked at because we've got the big games with Florida State, Georgia Tech, Georgia, Clemson, you know, next week. But um, as far as the FBS level, and we'll get back to FCS in a minute, but as far as the FBS level, is there any games that you're looking forward to seeing? Maybe obviously week zero's the one game, but like week one, any big games that you're looking forward to just sitting down, watching and enjoying?
Mm, I mean, I think there's always some good week 1 games. I think obviously Georgia Clemson it'll be a decent one, but I still there's like a weird feeling that I think that could end up being a blowout, Georgia's way in that one. I just think they're gonna be that good this year. I also think
Yeah.
Notre Dame, Texas A&M is gonna be a big one. Obviously, I think that's game day next week. Um, I'm just curious to see what those teams look like. Because Marcus Freeman, I was really, really high on him when he took that job. I think Notre Dame's underperformed with him, but they have a lot of talent, man. That defense, I think, is going to be really, really good. They got some studs on that side of the football. Then you got the new A&M era, man. I understand why everyone's skeptical about A&M because of the Jimbo Fisher days, but let's not forget. I mean, that team has talent, and they have a guy who I think can actually coach. It could actually win. I mean, you don't win at Duke if you can't coach. So I
Exactly.
think
I was about to
I
say
yeah, I think A&M that game is going to be very, very interesting. I think the Sunday game next week, USC LSU. I don't know how close it'll be, but it'll be interesting to see what Lincoln Riley does at quarterback. Obviously, I think Miller Moss is the quarterback now, the kid who
it's gonna be
started the
Miller
bowl
Moss.
game.
Yeah,
Yeah,
yeah.
and I'm interested to see what he looks like because he is out of a different mold than what we've been accustomed with Lincoln Riley having at quarterback the past few years, with Jalen Hurts and Caleb Williams and those guys. I think, and then LSU too, you got to replace the reigning Heisman Trophy winner. But listen, I think that kid behind him, Nussmeyer, can spin it. And you saw it in the bowl game. And I think LSU still has a lot of talent, especially defensively. I know that secondary didn't play well. They got a lot of guys returning. And I think Harold Perkins is one of the biggest freaks in this league. And so I think that USC LSU game on Sunday night in Vegas is going to be one to watch as well.
Well, that's gonna be dude, that's gonna be a great game. Obviously, you go from USC, it's the post Caleb Williams era. What will Lincoln Riley do now? Can USC actually have a defense? Because now being in the Big Ten, they have to play defense. And and then you look at LSU, you got Nussmeier, but you're returning a lot of guys on defense for LSU. You mentioned Perkins, who I'll be honest with you, if I was a college coach, if I'm a college offensive coordinator, I'm terrified going into that game against
Yeah.
it. Doesn't matter who the coach is against Perkins. And you mentioned Notre Dame A&M. I think people might be overlooking it. This is coach versus former quarterback because A&M's head coach at Duke was at Duke. Riley Leonard's now at Notre Dame. So it'll be interesting to see how the defense plays against Riley Leonard. And then you mentioned Marcus Freeman. I was same as you. I was very high on him when he got the job. I thought, oh, this is great. This is going to be awesome for Notre Dame. They're going to get a lot of publicity, and most importantly, they're going to win. They have underperformed, but I do think the 12-team playoff, they're going to get in it. They'll probably be a 5 seed, maybe a 6 seed, but they'll be in it. I am a little worried about their defense, and they got some good players back, but they bring in Jordan Clark, who is Ryan Clark's son. I haven't seen much of him because he was in the Pac-12, and I'll be honest with you, there was very little nights that I stayed up till 2 to 3 o'clock in the morning watching Pac-12 football. But I will, be watching the Notre Dame A&M game. I'm gonna keep up with Notre Dame all year. And you mentioned quarterback kind of being the position that everybody focuses on. Um, I'm guilty of that myself. I watch a lot of games and I only know the quarterback in college. That's why, like going down to the Senior Bowl this past year when I went, was eye opening for me because I learned a bunch of other talent that I didn't really know the names of. That when I saw them get drafted, it's like, wow. Like I got to be around those guys and watch those guys, and then to see them get their names called or signed to a team, like that was awesome for me to just watch. And I know I can't even imagine how they felt, getting that draft call. Some of these guys that didn't, weren't high on radar for these colleges, and then end up getting drafted. I would say Luke McCaffrey is somebody that yeah, he's high on the NFL radar because he's McCaffrey's brother. He's part of that grouping, but he also went to Rice, a team that didn't win a lot, a team that, wasn't on national television every week. And then he ends up being a fourth, fifth round pick, I believe. So, like, that's cool. That's awesome for him. And he's paired with one of the best quarterbacks in my opinion, the second best quarterback in the rookie class, in Jaden Daniels. I put Bo Nix as the best rookie quarterback, just my opinion on the film I've seen of him. I hope Caleb does well, but I also go based on how Chicago's done in the past. You know, with quarterbacks, they're not exactly known for building a rookie quarterback. They're known for getting 3 years out of them, shipping them out of town, and resetting the clock. That's kind of what they've always done. I hope it's different. I hope Caleb does well. Um, but yeah, I'm excited for like week 1 of college football, week 0, because then the NFL's right. I mean, I think it's right after week 1 is the NFL start.
Yeah.
So like, I'm excited for all of that, man.
Yeah, I mean, we finally get to kick it off this weekend, man. I'm pumped for it. I don't watch as much NFL football as I do college. But man, I'm just excited for the season. I think we got with the new 12-team playoff at the FBS level. I think that's going to create a lot of parity, a lot of interest around the postseason. I think we're going to get a lot of unique matchups in the playoff too, which we typically won't see. Maybe some matchups between some massive brands, and especially that first round being home and home. I think we're going to get some amazing environments as well. And then obviously in the FCS, I think this the one of the first years that you got those top four, but I think there's so much parity behind them that it's going to be a really really interesting season to follow.
Right. And you mentioned the 12-team playoff in the FBS. I'm excited to see how they do it with like who gets the buys and because of the home and home thing, like, do you want a bye week in the first round? Because obviously the
Mhm.
4 conference champions get the bye, but wouldn't you love to have like a home playoff game? Kind of I think it would be better than an NFL environment for sure. If like if you're Ohio State and you have to go into Penn State to play a home playoff game, that's going to be huge for that conference, massive game. And I think, like you said, it'll create a lot of interesting matchups. I know there's already people saying that this is just a way to get more SEC teams in because you look at like Bama, Georgia, Texas, Ole Miss, Missouri, LSU, A&M. Like there's and I could probably go on for a few more, but there's like a list of guys, teams that could be in there for the SEC. It's the same thing with the Big Ten. You got Michigan, and yes, they're the post Jim Harbaugh, Blake Corum, JJ McCarthy era, but you still got Michigan, Ohio State, who's going to be great. I'm sure they're going to have a great season. You got Oregon, who I'm sure is going to have a great year. You've got USC. You don't know what they're going to be, but I think Lincoln Riley buffed up his defense. And I think he finally is going to let his defensive coordinator really handle a lot of the game planning because you have to in the Big Ten. You don't have a choice. And I just mentioned Penn State. They're a team in the Big Ten that everybody's overlooking because of the Michigan, Ohio State, Oregon thing. Penn State could be a sneaky good team this year when you look at the guys they brought back and the back end of their defense is still there. Like they could be a good team. And I mean, a whiteout in Penn State for the playoffs would be, as a fan, I'd be like, I'd be jealous I'm not there. Like to be in that environment. So I'm kind of hoping everybody's got Bama finishing third in the SEC. I kind of hope we do. So there's a home playoff game at Bryant-Denny Stadium because that would be like incredible to see. But yeah, man, like, and as far as the FCS goes, like obviously I'm going to be watching Samford. I'm going to watch Gardner Webb. My cousin ended up going to Gardner Webb for a couple of years before he transferred to a JUCO school, but I'm going to watch them. I've heard really good things about their football team. How good can Gardner Webb be this year?
I mean, I don't know about this year. I mean, they made the playoffs last year. They won back-to-back championships, but they lost their head coach to ETSU, and he took like every single good player with him. They took like 20 something kids with them from Gardner Webb to ETSU. So they only returned two starters. And so
Oh,
it's going to be a
well,
completely revamped team, new coaching staff, everything. So I think Gardner Webb will be decent, but I don't think they're a playoff or championship team this year just because of all the uncertainty, unless all the transfers they brought in click, which is highly unlikely at this level.
right. And I'm glad that you mentioned that they had all those guys leave. I knew about the head coach leaving. I did not know he took the entire roster essentially with him.
Yeah.
Um, so see, I'm learning stuff. That's why we have people on here because I learned stuff, so I know my audience is also going to be learning stuff. Um, is there anybody from like a bigger from like the you mentioned the four that are kind of like the pillars of the playoffs for the FCS? Any of those three or any of those teams that might not make it just because of how strong the FCS is at the bottom of the rotation?
Like not make it to the playoffs
Yeah,
or
like not make the
no.
playoffs or just like maybe not make the championship.
I mean, obviously, there's only two spots. Obviously, two of them will be left out. But man, just based on the schedule, I mean, Montana State, North Dakota State, South Dakota State. I mean, they're guaranteed quarterfinals most likely. I think they're probably guaranteed top 8 bids, which is a bye week in the FCS playoffs. I just don't see how those teams fall apart. I mean, I think when you look, especially the two Montana schools, I don't see how either of those teams win less than 10 games next year.
Was it last year or a few years ago that College Game Day ended up going to Montana State? I believe for one of their games.
2 years ago.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Because that was when Pat McAfee first took his shirt off. On
Yeah.
bro, I'm excited to watch Game Day because he's back on there. I'm just a little worried about what he's going to do this year. But no, man. Like you mentioned the FCS guys, and obviously, College Game Day going to these FCS schools is huge because these schools don't get a lot of looks outside of that. So it's when I don't think that the media realizes how big that is for those schools to be have a game that important. The College Game Day is like, yeah, we have to go to that. We have
Yeah.
to be there. We have to be in that environment.
I mean, they've been to a bunch of games at the FCS level. I mean, North Dakota State hosted a few times. Jackson hosted when Dion was there. I know Montana State's hosted. I want to say South Dakota State hosted as well. There was a few
Yeah, they
games
did. They did.
throughout the 2000s. So there's been a few games where they've done it. It'll be interesting to see. There's always like lulls in the FBS schedule where maybe an FCS game could pop up. I think the marker game is probably on the radar this year. I believe that one's in Fargo. So North Dakota State could host again this year. I don't know what other games are that weekend. And then maybe the last week of the season, they go back to the brawl. I mean, I think looking at Montana State's schedule, there's a chance those two teams could be 11-0 going into that game, have one of the biggest rivalry games in the country, decide the Big Sky Championship, and then probably the number one overall seed at the FCS level. So maybe they get to go to Bozeman one more time for that last week of the FCS season.
Right. And honestly, that would be very enjoyable for just as a fan. Getting to watch college game day is awesome. And then when they go to these smaller schools at the FCS level, or even the small the small uh
Group
schools
of
like
five.
James Madison, yeah,
Yeah.
like James Madison when they went to them last year, like those crowds, I don't, I really don't think the mainstream media realizes how huge that is for those schools that they get that, you know, above some of these bigger schools like Alabama or Texas or, a school that they frequent a lot, Washington, Oregon. Like, I do think this year they're going to go to I think there's a chance they go to maybe 2 to 3 FCS weekends when there's
Mm,
not
I'll,
a big rivalry.
yeah, I don't know about 2 to 3. I think you're probably good for one a year. If that, I think the reason that brawl game probably is the pick is because the last week of the FCS season is the second to last week of the FBS season, and that's that week that all the SEC teams play cupcake
Cupcakes.
games, and
Yeah.
there's really no big games. So I think that's why the brawl could be there. In terms of Jackson got to host middle of the season because it was Dion, and you know they knew that they were going to get more views on that than anything. um, I find it hard to see more than one. If there is, I don't know, because I think even if they had 2 weeks that were open, they'd pick a group of five school like James Madison or an App State or whoever's the hottest team in the G5 level to go take game day to.
Right. And, I mean, even for those schools though, like that's a big deal because you see
Yeah.
them going like they're going to Ireland for Florida State, Georgia Tech. Like, I don't think I could be wrong, but isn't this like the first time that College Game Day has went out of the country for their show?
I'm not sure. Probably though. I mean, I'm trying to think if there's been any other games that they've had to go that far for. I don't think so though.
I think the farthest they've went before is like when they go to Oregon or somewhere like that. Like they went up to UMass obviously for the Army Navy game last year.
Yeah.
That's probably the farthest. I don't think they've ever went out of the country. Like they're going like and like I don't think Pat's doing his show on Thursday because I know his show is going to be there Friday in Ireland.
Yeah.
So I think that they're taking Thursday off to travel up there.
Hmm.
Um, that way they're not jet lagged and just tired and everything for Friday's show. I'm trying to think about some of these other schools that are at the FCS level that maybe not. Oh, UNA. Uh, I believe they're still FCS level.
Hmm.
Is there any chance that they have? I'm going to say 5 wins,
Yeah.
just based on what
I,
they've done in the past.
I think so. I mean, you look at North Alabama, it was a D2 powerhouse. They really lagged off there. But I mean, last year they won 3 games, and that was the first year of head coach Brent Dearman there. And I really, really like what he's building. I think quarterback they're upgraded. They got the returner from last year, but they also brought in a kid from Stanford, Ari. And I think he just based on watching his mechanics, I think he's gonna be a problem. They got one of the best wide receivers in the country coming back in TK Kennebrew. I think secondary wise, they have the UAC Defensive Player of the Year in Edwin White Schultz out of Mobile, where the Senior Bowl is hosted. And I think when you look at that team, there's a team that could take a step forward. I think they're a long shot dark horse. I don't know if I call them a dark horse, but more like a long shot to win the UAC. But I still think they're probably a year away from possibly competing for the FCS playoffs. So I think 5 wins is doable. Might be closer to their ceiling. Maybe 5, 6 wins would be the ceiling. But I think I think they're going to make a run. I think they're going to beat some teams you don't see expecting. You look at last year; they had Mercer on the ropes, who was an FCS playoffs team in the FCS kickoff game. They beat Chattanooga last year, who won an FCS playoff game, made a run to the second round of the playoffs. Chattanooga is a favorite in the SoCon this year, so I think North Alabama is right on the cusp of potentially building something pretty special there.
Well, that's why I mentioned 5 wins because I knew they had 3 wins last year. Um, and I wasn't trying to like be disrespectful to them, but I'm also trying to set like expectations for a year two under a new coach. Like
Yeah,
I'd say 5, 6 wins, like you said, is probably their ceiling. And
yeah.
I mean, we know their floor would be that they win nothing, but like I don't see that happening. I think, like you said, they're really good. Um, and they're like a dark horse to maybe make a look in the conference, but probably not a playoff push in year two.
Yeah, I could see it. I mean, I'll say this: like, I think when you look at that program, it there's a hunger surrounding it that they want to get back to where they were. 'Cause, I mean, that was a national championship program at the D2 level, and they have not lived up to that at this level. So I do think there's a hunger. They're putting a lot of money into that program in terms of stadium improvements, field improvements, fan experience, things like that. So you could tell the invested interest in there, and at this level, that does kind of carry some programs into contention that you may not see coming.
Well, I want to ask you because I believe, obviously Jacksonville State's one of them that went from the FCS to the FBS. Do you see any of those new teams that just kind of getting started in the FBS that could make a no? I'm not going to say playoff push because we know that's left for like the Liberties and then the Power Five guys. But any of those new schools that are just now coming in that maybe become like James Madison was last year and exceed expectations?
I mean, the thing is, Jacksonville State and James Madison came in at the same time. So if you're excluding those teams and talking about just the new teams like the Kennesaw States, um,
Right, right.
really it's just Kennesaw State this year, if I'm not mistaken. I don't think Delaware, Missouri State come till next year, the 2025 year. So, I mean,
Yeah,
I
it's
don't think,
just Kennesaw State. Yeah, it's just
yeah,
Kennesaw State.
they're not going to do anything. They're going to be terrible. I think they'll probably lose to UT Martin next year, which will be an FCS over FBS upset. Now, I think Kennesaw is going to struggle in that transition. They were terrible last year. I mean, they struggled with like an NAIA school last year. So I just don't, unless there's some massive changes across the board with Kennesaw, I don't think you're going to see a James Madison or Jacksonville State type jump out of the Owls next year.
Um, you mentioned how Kennesaw State was pretty, you know, they're moving up. They're probably not going to be very good. Were you surprised that they made the jump?
No, just because, I mean, you look at that school, and I think this is tough for people who aren't involved at this level is that a lot of the teams that move is not winning that unlocks the door a lot of the times. It's TV market. And with Kennesaw having that Atlanta market, they were in prime position. Also, too, people forget Kennesaw's school is as big as Georgia in terms of student
Right.
population. I mean, they got like 20,000 kids there. That's not an
Yeah.
FCS enrollment. And also too, it's like I said, it's just the location. So I'm not surprised they jumped. They've been vocal that they were gonna jump when they could, similar to how Delaware jumped. That's a big state school, good area up there in that northeast. Missouri State's got the Springfield, that Missouri St. Louis type area locked down. So that's why you're seeing these teams that might not be great make the jump compared to like why is North Dakota State not received an invite yet? It's because nobody wants the North Dakota television market. That's not
Right.
it's not going to make a conference any money. And then also too, the travel costs for a North Dakota State to jump, the conference that would make most sense for them to join is probably the Big 12, maybe, and
That
jump
ain't
into a
happening.
yeah, jumping to a P4 conference is not happening. So that's why you see some of these bigger, more successful schools like the Montanas, the North Dakota States, not haven't made that jump yet. Is because just financially it doesn't make sense. And two, there's not large television markets in those areas that would that conferences want to acquire per se.
Well, I know a few years ago, Coastal Carolina made the jump because they won in baseball, and like the next year they were like, "Hey, let's bring you to the Sun Belt," and they've done fairly well for themselves. They've done really well in all three sports. They've gotten better at football, they got better at basketball, and they've always been good at baseball. So that's why I was kind of asking if you were surprised they made the jump because, from my knowledge of just the outside looking in, the teams that win, like Jacksonville State, James Madison, made the jump. So that's kind of why I was asking that because like they haven't really won that much. But like you said, they're in the Georgia market, they're in that area, and their school is massive.
Yeah,
And they're getting a lot more exposure now because a former player that played for them is now wrestling professionally in WWE, and he does anything he can to put over Kennesaw State. Uh, I don't know if you watch wrestling, but Braun Breaker, who played at Kennesaw State, ended up going to the NFL and did a camp with the Ravens, I believe, in 2020. Is now, on national TV wrestling every week, and he really does. He puts over Kennesaw State really well. He still loves the coaching staff. He still talks about them. He still says that the trainers, everybody there, and like the facilities are like Division 1 Power 5 facilities at a smaller school.
yeah. No, I think that's awesome. I mean, I think there was a kid from Hampton who was making that jump too. But I don't watch wrestling, so I don't know if he ever made it. But I know he talked about it.
Right. And again, that's why I kind of asked if you watch wrestling because like
Mhm.
I do, but and a lot of these guys that are playing in college football at smaller schools, they end up getting into the NIL deal with the WWE, and they make that jump. And they, if you could give me his name, I could probably figure out if he made it or not.
I think it's Keyshawn Moore from Hampton.
I think he's there. I think he's still training.
Okay, yeah,
He's still in the performance center because I think what class was that? Was that did he
he
make
came
the
out
jump?
last year.
Yeah, he's still there. Because they introduced the NIL class from last year a couple months ago, and like the next in line to be on TV. And I believe
Hmm.
he was one of the names they mentioned when they put it out.
Yeah, he was a stud at Hampton.
Right. And something else I do love is like the spring league, like the UFL. I think that's huge for guys out of smaller schools, not necessarily FCS, but like really any small school. Because like if you don't get an opportunity to go to the NFL, there is another pathway to the league, and you're getting paid while you're doing it, and you get to be on national TV on ESPN, which maybe you didn't get at a small school. So
Yeah.
I do like that they do that. Were you gonna say something?
Oh no, I was just agreeing with you. My bad, man. I thought I didn't know you
No,
were finished.
no. I thought. Well, as I was finishing up, I heard you say something, or I thought I heard you say something. So I just wanted to make sure. Um, yeah, man. So like, and again, g- you know, I love what y'all are doing over at FCS Central. I follow you on social media. I follow your, that profile as well. I follow all of y'all stuff. I've been watching all of y'all stuff, hearing all y'all stuff. I read everything you post. Um, because, for me as a, let's say casual college football fan, I'm a big Alabama fan, but outside of the big games, I don't really watch much. I'm more of an NFL watcher. Listening and learning from guys that cover the smaller schools makes me a better podcast host, makes me a better fan, and then I can bring you guys on and have conversations like this. So I really appreciate you coming on and doing that for me. And again, last minute, literally, I think if I'm not mistaken, I texted you on like Thursday. I was
Yeah,
like, "Hey, man, yeah," and we found a way to make it work. And
yep,
I'm glad that you're able to fit me in your schedule because I know you're probably super busy with getting stuff ready for the football season. So I'm really grateful you fit me into that tight little schedule. Anything you want to say to anybody watching, maybe about FCS football or FCS Football Central, or plug your stuff, put over your stuff.
Yeah, man. As always, like I told you, man, anytime you want me on here, man, I'll make the time for you. It was good catching up with you in Mobile for the Senior Bowl, and I definitely appreciate the invite to come on here and chop it up about college football, FCS football, anything you want to talk about. Yeah, you can find me Zach Mckinnell on social media, obviously, and then FCS Football Central on SI. It's si.com/college/FCS. And the podcast is the Blue Bloods. And we got the Coach's Corner, myself, my guy, Coach Fred down at Alcorn State, my co-host, Timothy Rosario. We got a bunch of good content. I'll be co-hosting with Sam Herder from Hero Sports this year on a big FCS podcast. So if you need to know anything about the FCS, man, we got you covered at all levels, man. Any of the 100 and 20, 30 schools at the subdivision, man, you can find it on our website, on the show, or just on social media as well, man. But Nick, as always, man, I appreciate you.
Man, I appreciate you being on here, and I mean, guys, you just heard it. He covers everything FCS. As far as guys that really work their butt off, I'd say you're probably one of the hardest working people I know. And
Appreciate you, man.
I'm not just like, saying that because you're on here. Like, I genuinely mean that. Like, social media, everything you're doing. Obviously, you know, you being extremely generous and kind to me at the Senior Bowl when we first met, really opening up and letting me know more about the FCS was great. And your advice and your help, because I've reached out to guys that I met at the Senior Bowl, and you're one of the few people I met that I genuinely believe I could come to and say, "Hey, man, I need help with this," or give me advice on this, and you would open up and give me the advice. So, genuinely, I appreciate it. And you say an open invitation. You want to be on my podcast again, dude? Anytime you want to be on here, all you have to do is text me, bro. I
I got
am
you, guys.
I am more than happy to make time for you to be on here, and because again, you educate me just like you're educating the audience, because I know NFL football. That's what I know. That's what I watch. That's what when I was at the Senior Bowl, I was there to watch the guys going into the NFL, and I knew a lot about the quarterbacks, obviously, because I watched all the quarterback stuff. But like the other guys on the roster, I had to learn, and you were one of the few people that really helped me in learning. And that was my first year doing something like that at the Senior Bowl, and I'm looking forward to next year. Hopefully, you'll be there.
Yep.
I'm hoping. Yeah, man. So maybe we can get in touch and do something at the Senior Bowl. Maybe do a thing at the Senior Bowl. But guys, make sure to go follow Zach on all of his social media. I will put the links for all of his stuff in the description below. Make sure to follow him. Keep up with all of his stuff. This guy works extremely hard and one of the nicest humans ever as well. If you have any questions for him, I'm sure put them down in the comment section. He'll come back and watch, and he will absolutely answer them. Or if you've just got any opinions on FCS football, on college football, put them in there. I'm sure he would love to go back and forth with you in the
Yep.
comments, because I know with me on Twitter, I try to stay out of the comment section, but there's sometimes, dude, people be people will comment stuff, and I'm like, I have to respond, bro. I try to stay out of it, but sometimes you just have to.
I feel you on that. It takes time. I promise. It'll come. Like I used to be the same way. Now I'm just like the mute button. Like you'll learn this. Like the more you're in the sports media business, things like that. The more you grow, the mute button's your friend.
Oh, and
The mute
absolutely, dude.
button's your friend. Whether
I've
it's
already
accounts, words, anything. Like there's certain times a year I'll mute words. Like certain words, I'm just like I'm good. I don't want to be involved in this.
right, dude. I'm the same way on Twitter. I can't tell you how many people, like, if I comment something, people will just slash it. I'm like, block, block. Because like, if you're the way I look at it, man, if you're negative, I don't want you in my space. Because if you're a negative person, all you're gonna do is bring me down, and I don't want to be brought down to your level. So I just try to keep it positive. And guys, make sure to like this video, subscribe to my channel. I believe, last check was 524 subscribers. So we're trying to make that 1,000 mark. Really hoping I can make that 1,000 mark by the end of the year. Make sure to like this video, subscribe to the channel. Again, guys, follow Zach on all of his social media. Hopefully this won't be the last time he's on. Um, so maybe around mid-season we get him back on here to talk about how some of the teams are doing.
Yep.
And it's completely free to subscribe to my channel, guys. It costs you absolutely nothing. All I ask is that you watch these videos, you learn something, and you just enjoy the content. And guys, again, subscribe to my channel, please. I'm trying to get to 1,000 subscribers. And again, completely free to do so. I say this in all my videos, and it's serious. I will never ask somebody for money or to pay to have to watch my content. It will never happen like that. I promise you, it'll always be free. If if I start making money from this, it will be genuine from like YouTube. I will not ask anybody to pay to watch any of my content. There will never be a paywall behind my stuff. But Zach, anything else you want to say before we end the video here?
Nah, man. Again, appreciate you guys for having me, and you for inviting me, and looking forward to chopping it up mid season or postseason, man, and getting to see you in Mobile at the Senior Bowl.
All right, man. Appreciate it.